Welcome to America's Top Rebbetzins. In the merit of this class, may Hashem watch over all the Jewish people and give enormous strength to the IDF soldiers, including Yuval Kim Bat Miriam, Ziv Ben Tamar, Aviatar Zitoni Ben Natalie Viron, and Ben Menashe Ben Dikla. Please click on the subscribe button to subscribe to us on the America's Top Rebbetzins YouTube page, or click follow to follow us on your podcasting app so you're the first to know when an inspiring episode is posted. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Rebbetzin Feige Slavaticki to our podcast. Rebbetzin Feige and her husband, Rabbi Menachem, run the Chabad Israeli Center, which is a vibrant hub for Jewish life and learning in Skokie, Illinois. For those not familiar with Skokie, it's a suburb of Chicago. Rebbetzin Feige has cultivated a thriving community centered around Jewish education, culture, and spirituality. She also offers adult education programs, including classes for beginners as well as advanced scholars. The classes not only explore Jewish texts and philosophies, but help people implement those teachings into their everyday lives, which I think is super important. Rebbetzin Feige also teaches college classes for brides in order to prepare them for marriage. Thank you so much for being here. Please tell us more about yourself and what you do.
All right, thank you. I think you pretty much covered what I do in a nutshell. Just a couple corrections. First of all, my last name is Slavaticki.
Okay,
I know
thank you.
that's usually people get stuck on that. And the second piece is that although we live in Skokie, our shlichus is not specifically geared for people in Skokie. For that, you have Chabad of Skokie, and we are here working with a demographic, and that is the Israelis. So while we're located in Skokie, we actually service the Israelis throughout Chicagoland.
Wow. So
Mhm.
really it's very Israeli oriented. Like that's your audience.
Correct. Our audience is Israeli.
That is so cool. I think that's so unique. I've interviewed so many Chabad rabbis in Baruch Hashem, but I've never met one that's really specifically focused on Israelis. What is that like?
That is, yes, it is a unique shlichus. And I have to say, so we came down here about 18 years ago, and it took me a while to get used to the Israeli culture, the Israeli mentality. I'm from Michigan. My parents run the Chabad, Beis Chabad of West Bloomfield. You actually interviewed my mom a couple of years ago, Rebbetzin Feige Slavaticki. And so I grew up on shlichus, but this was totally different. And Israelis say it as it is. They don't mince words. And it just took me a while to get used to the very different culture. But I have to say that over the years, I've really come to appreciate and love their warmth, their authenticity, the genuine. And I also find that there's a really strong emunah that these Israelis have, even those that don't consider themselves religious. And it's extremely inspiring, I have to say.
It is really inspiring. And, just as you were saying that, it made me think of something that I want to share along those lines about Israelis having Amuna, because I found this very, very striking. I was just in Israel for Sukkot with my family. My son recently made Aliyah, and my whole family was there to visit him. And we happened to be in Tzvat, and we're recording this in November of 2024, and it's a time period where Israel is getting a lot of rockets, a lot of drones, and a lot of attacks, especially in the north. So we happened to be in the north. We happened to be in Tzvat. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there was a rocket. It looked like it was coming directly at me. It didn't look like it was going over me. It looked like it was coming directly at me. Like it was angled specifically to me. That's what it looked like from my point of view where I was standing. And I started screaming. Now, you have to keep in mind, I was the only one in Tzvat screaming. There's nobody screaming around me, nobody crying, nobody running. I am the only person who is screaming. I'm from New York. The only sirens we have ambulance and police cars. That doesn't faze me. I don't even hear it. But rocket sirens, because the siren went off when the rocket came, it was a little crazy for me. So of course I ran. I don't know where I was running, but I was running, and then I stopped. The sirens eventually stopped. Everything was calm. Everything was fine. The rocket got blown up. But these two Israeli women came up to me. They saw that they heard me screaming from wherever they were. They came up to me very calmly, very quietly. And one of the women, she said to me, I'm never going to forget this. She said, I understand that you're scared, but we've been living here for 10 years. And we are so used to this. And you know what? Hashem has an address for every single
Yes.
rocket. And I'm like, wow. And they didn't look like Israeli people. I mean, like religious people. They were just Israeli, just not non-religious. And they were telling me this. And I'm like, wow, like to hear this, because it was so true. It was such a muna coming from this person. It really, really completely changed my perspective, actually made me feel a lot better.
Yes, they have such a deep and real amuna. They really do.
Yes, they really, really do. Yes. But I so back to the topic of our podcast. But thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad that you're working with the Israeli population. They are really, really special. But so in addition to responsibilities that you have in running the Chabad house, you're also the mother of 11 children. And I understand that two of your children have special needs. Your 17-year-old son has autism and your baby daughter has Down syndrome. So you're putting forth a strong effort both to raise your children with special needs while doing everything else that's involved in running a home, with balancing that with work as well. It's really a lot. And I just want to take a minute to give you a lot of credit for doing it all. So today we're going to hear your story and learn the inside scoop on how you do what you do. And I'm very grateful to you for sharing your story. So thank you in advance, because I think it will give so many other women such tremendous hizziks, tremendous strength to know that they're not alone in what they're going through. So I would like to now invite you to share with us a little bit about your family and what it was like when you first learned that your son has autism.
Okay. So our 17-year-old son, Chaim, he is our third. We had two older boys, and we had just come here to Chicago 1 year earlier. And he was born perfectly healthy. Everything was smooth, but already from when he was 5 days old, we were noticing some really disturbing signs. He was extremely lethargic. He would have these periods where he would seem to be holding his breath. He would have, apnea where he wasn't breathing. He would turn blue a little bit around the lips. I brought him into the doctor a couple of times. She thought I was just a new mom, over, protective and worried, and everything was fine. But eventually he ended up in the hospital. So twice he was hospitalized. Um, and the second time that he was hospitalized, he was intubated. They decided that they would need to send him, they would need to transfer him to another hospital. And before they did so, they wanted to intubate him because they did see that his oxygen levels kept dipping. And before they intubated him, he was crying. And I wanted to feed him. Now, to nurse him. Now, really, if you're going through intubation, you can't nurse your child. You can't eat before intubation because of aspiration, the possibility of the food coming up and, during intubation. But I guess the nurse on duty didn't know that. And I nursed the baby. And sure enough, when they intubated him, he aspirated. And he was without oxygen for a very long time. I would say about 10 minutes, until finally they got him and intubated him, and they transferred him to the other hospital, where he remained in the NICU for about a month. So, fast forward a couple of years, when he was diagnosed, it wasn't out of nowhere. So although he came home and he was thriving once he came home, he did come home on an NG tube. Eventually, we were able to remove that as well. And he was doing well, but at 2 years old, when we brought him in, and then finally had his diagnosis, which different doctors actually felt differently about it, but it was a devastating blow, but it wasn't out of nowhere.
Okay. Okay. So when he was being hospitalized, they didn't know yet that it was autism. It was just because of different health concerns, or they did.
No, certainly not.
Okay.
When he was hospitalized, it was to try and get to the bottom of what was going on, why he was having these episodes where he wasn't breathing. Eventually, they detected seizures. They detected feeding issues, but it wasn't until he was about 2.5 that he was diagnosed.
Okay. Okay. And once you found out that he was diagnosed with the autism, how did that affect you and your family?
So it was very difficult. I mean, this is 17 years later, and I don't sit with those strong feelings, but it was, it was a hard time. It was definitely a hard time. It was painful. It felt lonely, even though, my husband was and has always been the greatest support and rock. And my family and my husband's family, extremely supportive and have always been there for us. And yet still it felt lonely.
I can tell you, I mean, you're so lucky and you're so blessed to have so much support because I know some people listening now, they're going through something similar to what you're going through and they don't have as much as support. So you're very, very blessed.
And I can't imagine that. I can't imagine that. I can't imagine doing it, without my husband and without the support of our family. So you're absolutely right.
Yes. And so, and I totally get that you would feel lonely because you're the mother going through this. You were probably primarily responsible for his care. Is that right?
Correct, correct, correct.
Okay. And so how did you deal with the loneliness? I mean, I'm guessing it took you a little bit of time to figure out what to do and how to process it and to develop a perspective on it.
Yeah, these things take time, and you have to allow the process. There's no getting around the process, I think. And one of there's so many blessings that I am and was surrounded with at that time that helped us through. And I would say that first and foremost is the perspective that we have, that we're blessed to have, growing up with such a strong education, such a strong chinuch from both my home and school, all the things that we learned throughout our schooling and living at home and, growing up with the concepts of Emunah and Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence, and everything is for the good, and Hashem is with us every step of the way. And these are things that are, in our songs, in our prayers, in our learning, in our everyday lives. And that really gave me the tools to navigate and process what was going on. So I felt so fortunate to have this perspective. So yes, it was, painful, it was lonely, it was very hard. But knowing that I had those tools to dig into and to pull out and to really personalize them, and that was the biggest gift that I could have had.
Right. And I imagine that. And I was actually going to ask you like how your Torah education, your upbringing, your Yiddishkeit, how that helped you through it because we have an audience from all walks of life and I just wanted to see if maybe you can share with us, maybe even like to be specific, some of those Torah tools that you were saying. Just my goal is to really, really help women who are listening, who are going through this and maybe they don't know who to turn to. Maybe they're feeling like you do. Maybe they have a few families, some friends that they can go to, but they're still feeling alone. They're feeling isolated and they need something greater than themselves, greater than their surroundings to draw upon.
100%. So a few things come to mind. I'll share with you. I was giving a class on Tuesday morning. I give a weekly Torah class to women, and I was listening to a class by Rabbi Schneur Ashkenazi in Hebrew. And he gave this fabulous mashal, a fabulous parable that I shared with the women. This week is Parshas Vayera, so it talks about the test, the 10 tests of Avram, the test of the Akedah. So obviously a very applicable subject, talking about the tests that we go through in life, the challenges that we go through.
For sure.
And he gives this example of a Mosad agent who went to the enemy country to fulfill a mission. And while he's there, he hails a cab one day, and a taxi pulls up, and he gets into the car. And as he walks into the car, he feels right away like something is very amiss. And he turns around, he looks in the back, and he sees that there are two guys there, with guns in their hands, facing him, telling him, don't move. And he realized that his cover was blown. And sure enough, they take him to this basement. They blindfold him. They take him to this basement somewhere. So he's all alone, and they begin interrogating him. And they don't let up. They're interrogating him. They're beating him. They're taking everything out of him. And he thinks to himself, how much longer can I withstand these? How much longer can I withstand this? I'm all alone.
Right.
But one day, he overhears by mistake. So the door is left open, and he overhears his captors talking with each other, and they're talking in Hebrew.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, he realizes, wait a second, these are not actually my enemies. These are people from the Mosad that had been sent to test him and to see how much could he withstand. How much, will he divulge the information, or will he be able to stand strong? And from
Wow.
that moment on, once he had that clarity, he was able to not only withstand the interrogation, but the more they made it difficult for him, the more he was happy to show his strength, because he knew that this was about testing him to bring out his strength, to promote him, to show him the strength that he never knew he had.
Wow. This is like mind blowing. I love it. Go on. This is mind blowing. I'm
Yes.
loving this.
So, it's phenomenal. This is phenomenal. As soon as we're able to recognize and realize that the tests that we have in life, all the challenges that face us, and we feel like we're falling apart, and how much longer can I handle this? And there's no way I can withstand this. And, I have such bad luck, and how could Hashem do this to me? And then when we have that clarity, and we realize that our captor is not against us, it's Hashem who loves us, who's on our side. And he's not going to let us down, but he's there to show us the strength that we have inside of us. Then all of a sudden, it feels very different to carry this challenge, and I'm not doing it by myself, and it's something which is ultimately for my good and for the good of my family, even though I don't may not see it right now, and it's difficult right now. So it's these pearls of wisdom and clarity that absolutely make such a difference in going through these challenges, and really any challenges in life that we have.
That is spectacular and amazing, and that's actually life-changing for me, like for me personally. Listen, we all have our challenges. Everybody has different challenges, including me. And this is something that I'm going to remember. And in fact, I'm actually going to share this story with my kids, because you're so right, and I love that. It wasn't. It's so interesting. The Mossad agent was testing this guy in the Mossad he's probably like a new guy, just to make sure that he's like up for the job. But it's so true, because who's giving us our tests? Who's giving us our challenges? It's not some enemy. It's not, somebody in the background behind the curtain. It's actually Hashem, who is obviously and of course always on our side. And he's doing it. Sometimes you say, everything happens for a reason. So we don't always know the reason, but we know, like you said, the tests and challenges that we're given are designed to bring out our strengths. And who knows where down the line we're going to need those strengths that are brought out specifically through the tests and challenges that we're going through right now.
100%. Exactly. Exactly. So
Wow.
it's really, really these messages that resonate so deeply, that we're so lucky, we're so blessed to have this perspective. We just need to take it and internalize it. But it's all over. I feel especially fortunate to learn so much of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's teachings, the sichos, the Rebbe's perspective, the Rebbe's optimism, the Rebbe's view on special needs, and how it's a special neshama coming into this world that we weren't trusted with, but always positive, always positive. And really, it's the Rebbe's words that have stayed with me and stay with me and give chizuk, give strength on a daily basis.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I imagine that the strength that you learn from the Rebbe, from learning his works, has also helped you down the line, because this is your 17-year-old son who has autism. But earlier I had mentioned that you also have a baby daughter who has Down syndrome.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So tell me about her.
Okay, so Perry's our baby daughter, named after my grandmother. She was born on Hoshana Rabbah. She was actually born on October 6th, one day before, October 7th,
Oh, just this past
2023,
year. Okay, okay.
a
Mhm.
year ago.
A year ago,
Yes.
right? Yes. Hmm.
And, it's interesting because we run the Chabad Israeli Center, and the day before I had Perry, I had a woman's event. And the woman's event was on Sukkot, was on Sukkot. And because Sukkot is Chag Simchatenu, right, the holiday of happiness, I figured that it would be apropos to have a panel of women who would share from our community, who would share about how to be happy, how to stay happy during challenging times.
Perfect.
So I had this women's event. I wasn't due for another 3 weeks. I had women lined up to give the workshop. And for whatever reason, one after the next, these women all backed out on me. I had 3 presenters and each one backed out on me.
Oh
The
my.
last one backed out on me 1 hour before the event. So the event was 8 p.m. I pulled up at 7 p.m. to finish setting up in the sukkah at our shul. And she left me a message. I am so sorry. I came home from work. I wasn't feeling well. I thought I would lie down and I would wake up and be fine to come. And I woke up and I'm feeling miserable. So there was our last presenter who
Oh yeah.
got canceled. And I had about, 30, 35 women that were showing up in an hour. And I said to myself, well, Feige, you have, spoken about this before in the past in different settings and different groups. And so I had a prepared speech that I had shared before. And I said, you know what? Here, I'm going to I'm going to share it with these women, even though I wanted them to hear a new face, but they were going to hear me again because there was no one else that was presenting. And my speech talked about what it was like raising my son, Chaim, with special needs, and how I was able to and am able to find happiness and joy and meaning in the challenges of raising him. Now, little did I know that one day later, the next day, I was going to have a baby with Down syndrome. I had no idea. The scans showed a perfectly healthy, beautiful baby. And so her birth was a complete surprise that she had Down syndrome. And I just had her, and obviously tremendous shock, but reverberating in my head was my talk that I had given one day earlier at this woman's event. And I realized that Hashem wanted me to hear myself. We have the answers inside of ourselves. And sometimes we just need to access them. And there was, like one day earlier, I'd spoken with such passion about the meaning and the joy and the acceptance. And that really helped me to, begin processing.
Wow. So now I'm curious. What you maybe not don't remember, but do you maybe recall something that you said from that day that helped you? I know it was a little while ago, but do you recall of some words of wisdom that you could share with us?
Um, I don't recall offhand,
That's
but
okay.
it's all these same messages, of divine providence and strong belief in Hashem. I believe I may have shared a story, also a mashal that I don't recall where I heard it from, but something that resonated very deeply. And also has to do with a taxi driver. So there was a guy who hailed on a cab, and he gets into the taxi and doesn't see any enemies, but he sees that in the front seat next to the taxi driver, there was an additional steering wheel. And he wondered about that. What is the additional steering wheel? Is it maybe like a driving teacher's car? Like what would be the meaning behind a second steering wheel? And so he struck up conversation with the cab driver and asked him about it. And the cab driver said, my son, I have a 3-year-old son, and he loves driving the car. And he's obsessed with cars. And he would come into my car and he would pretend that he was driving the car. And one day he turned something on, and the car almost, began moving with my son at the wheel. And I realized that this is extremely dangerous. Even though I thought it was impossible for it to happen, I realized it's extremely dangerous. And so what I did was I installed a second steering wheel next to me. And so from that point on, whenever my son would like to drive a car, I say, sure, come sit next to me and you can drive your car. So he's, he's with the steering wheel. He thinks he's driving the car, but I'm the one that's driving the car. And that's the idea behind this mushal is that really Hashem is driving the car. We think we're driving the car. We think we're in control. We think if I do, X, Y, and Z, then the results are going to be, exactly the way because I'm in control. And we need to realize that Hashem is in control. Like he's driving the car. We're the passenger, and Hashem wants from the passenger to do the best that they could do. Right. So with whatever tools Hashem has given us, we need to do the best we can. But ultimately, where we're going to get to, it's Hashem. Hashem is driving the car and Hashem is in control. And the ability to relinquish control is so liberating. Because when I think that I'm carrying everything on my shoulders and I am in control, that's a really heavy load. That's too much for me to bear. That's too much for me to handle. How am I supposed to know how to navigate this journey? How am I supposed to really know how to plan for the future so I could learn from here and I could learn from there and here? I went to a fair yesterday. My son's school had a fair for, he's graduating this year and life beyond high school. And it was so overwhelming. It's like 25 tables, and each table had, vendors that were, sharing what they do and how they could help you. So if I'm the one that's in control, it's too much. It's overwhelming. When I know that I can feel secure because Hashem is in control and Hashem wants me to do the best that I can do. And when I do that, He'll bring me to exactly where I need to be. And again, these concepts, when I think about it, when I apply it to my life, when I personalize it, those are extremely helpful tools in this journey and in all of my challenges, I would say.
It's fantastic. It really, and I love the muscle. You have the best muscles.
They're not mine, but these are mashalim that really, stick with me.
Yeah, because like the little kid is like driving. He wants to drive. I know when I was little too, and my kids also, like they just want to take the steering wheel. They want to be in control. They want to be driving. I feel like we all do. We all want to be in control of our lives as much as possible. I feel like it's a basic human inclination. But what you said is so powerful because as much as we want to be in control, yes, of course, we have to do our best. We have to put in our effort. We have to put in our hishtadlus. Ultimately, it's Hashem that's driving. He's really in the driver's seat. He knows where we're going, where to make a right, where to make a left, how far to go. He knows everything, and he's really the master doing all the driving. And which I feel like, we could take a deep breath and we can
Yes.
take that
Yes.
load off our shoulders a little bit.
Yes. It's a very comforting thought. It
Wow.
really is.
Wow. That's gonna sink in. I'm also gonna process that. And I'm gonna mull that over because I mean it's applicable to everybody's lives and mine as well. It's a game changer when we can really, really do that to
Yes, it is.
understand,
Yes,
that we're
it is.
not as in control as we think we are or as we want to be, and to have that amuna that we were talking about earlier, like to give it to Hashem. It's so beautiful.
I remember I was sharing with a group over Zoom, a group of moms who are part of a friendship circle, special needs, mothers of children with special needs. And I was sharing with them on Zoom. And it was when COVID had just hit. And I shared with them, I said, I think that part of the struggle with COVID, aside for obviously the main concern of the health, was that all of a sudden people felt like they weren't in control anymore.
Right.
Like until COVID, my calendar was full. I knew what I was doing in the summer and knew what I was doing next year. Like if my calendar was fully filled in, and all of a sudden COVID hit and whoa, in an instant, the world, changed and no control, right? So,
Yep.
my son was supposed to get married. I'm not saying myself, but I'm saying, if somebody's child was supposed to get married, well, I actually don't know. Was the wedding going to happen? Was it going to happen on time? Would there be 10 people? Would we be able to do it in a hall? Like all of a sudden, people really felt like the carpet was pulled out from under their feet because we weren't in control anymore.
Right.
And I was telling these women that as mothers of children with special needs, in a certain sense, we already went through that.
Right.
We already have to relinquish control and realize that we're not fully in control, and we don't know, will our child ever speak? Will our child ever be able to go to school? Will our child be independent? And realize and come to the, internalize that idea that Hashem is in control. And so there was a certain benefit that we had already reached that point of realizing we're not in control. And so that, again, going back to, circling back to that concept that when we realize that Hashem is in control and we're able to, let him take the driver's seat, it's a very comforting feeling.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. So now I want to, talk to you a little bit about running a Chabad house because it's your Chabad house is such a guiding light for so many Jews, specifically Israeli Jews. And that's a full-time job in itself, just running a Chabad house with the programming and the events and everything like that. Like, how do you balance your responsibilities as a Rebbetzin with taking care of the special needs of your son and with your baby, and also with raising your other children as well, because you have other children too? Like, how do you manage it all together?
Okay, so I think I'll start by saying that I don't do it all. I don't believe in that concept of being able to do it all, woman. I do the best I can all the time. My mother, many years ago, coined this term, which I love, and it's called judicious neglect. And the idea behind this judicious neglect is that it's impossible to, be on top of every part of our lives all the time. I can't have a spotless home and, pull off, complete self-care, take care of every single one of my children's needs, do every program at Chabad, take care of my husband, be there for my husband and do everything perfectly. It's not reality. It's not possible. And if it was, it would be an extremely stressful household if I expected myself to be on top of everything. And so the idea behind judicious neglect is that we are okay with the idea that things are going to be neglected, but it's judicious neglect. That means I'm going to make sure that I'm not neglecting the same thing all the time. So sometimes it's going to be my home that's not in tip-top shape and have, exactly every last piece of, gadget and furniture that it needs. And sometimes it's going to be that the Chabad programs are going to be, not as, maybe as many programs as I would like. And sometimes my children's wardrobes are not going to be 100% complete. And, and it's okay as long as it's not continuously the same thing that's being neglected. It's okay and it's healthy for things to be a little bit neglected some of the time. And I think that, growing up with that was a gift because I think that perfectionism is so stressful and having to do it all and everything be 100% is a very stressful way of living and also pretty much impossible. So I don't do it all, but I try to do a lot of judicious neglect.
Wow. I really love that concept. And I mean, I feel like this can apply to everybody. You don't need to be like working full time and have like an entire household of kids. I think it applies to everybody.
100%, 100%, 100%. And then I think that there's another piece that comes to mind, and that is that for me, and I think for most people, what's overwhelming is when we think about everything that has to be done,
Yes.
right? Or when I even like take my child with special needs, like when I think about his whole life, right? It's an extremely overwhelming thought. Like, what's going to be when he's 25 and 35 and 45 and, it's overwhelming when we think of everything. But if I break it down and I think, what can I do right now? So that's not overwhelming, right? And it also gives me something to do. So it grounds me, So to give you another story, it's not really a story, but it's something that I've heard many years ago and also resonated deeply with me. The Lubavitcher Rebbe's secretary, Rabbi Yudel Krinsky, was once handed a letter that the Rebbe had made a bunch of corrections and handed it back to Rabbi Krinsky to retype with all the corrections. Now, the letter, the Rebbe would like circle words and make an arrow and, write something about that. And when Rabbi Krinsky took the paper, it was filled, all the margins were filled with writing and there were circles and squiggles. And the Rebbe looked at Rabbi Krinsky and he saw on his face that the job seemed very overwhelming.
Yeah.
And the Rebbe said to him, if you start from the beginning and you go word by word, you'll see you'll make it to the end.
Wow.
And I try to apply that all the time. When I get overwhelmed, just start at the beginning. Don't look at the whole picture because that's overwhelming. But what can I do right now? Okay, so to give you an example, last week, one of my children's teacher, one of my daughter's teachers called me to tell me that my daughter was having issues in a certain area of identifying her ABCs. So automatically when the teacher calls me, like I'm right away,
Stressed. Yes.
And then when we finished the conversation, it felt very overwhelming. Like she's one of 11 and like, how am I going to navigate, academic issues for this one child, plus deal with any other teachers that, have to call me and how can I, and then I was like, wait a second. I can spend 4 minutes tonight to go over the sounds of the ABCs with her. Like that's not overwhelming. Right. And then the next day, I could do that too, 4 minutes a day to work with her. And all of a sudden, something that was so overwhelming is fine. And I'm able to do something concrete with her. She's doing just fine, thank God. But being able to just start at the beginning, just take a step. Don't look at the whole overwhelming picture, which also makes me think about I remember when I had my first baby 21 years ago. So I remember telling my husband more than one time, I was like, I don't understand how people have large families. Like, forget 10 kids. How do people have 4 and 5 and 6 kids? How are people pregnant with their second baby? When you have a toddler and you're nauseous, you're tired, like, what do you do with your toddler? And I was just feeling overwhelmed. I'm one of 10, thank God. And I was feeling overwhelmed thinking about having a large family. And my husband, would tell me, we don't have 10 kids at once, right? We're not in Mitzrayim where there were 6 babies born at once. You grow into it. Right. So when you talk about Chabad house and 11 kids and, classes, and it didn't happen overnight. It's one step at a time. And I deal with one thing at a time in my day. And when I do it that way, and then that really cuts the overwhelm.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's so doable. Like when you describe it like that, when you break it down, where you don't look at the whole picture, you're not looking at each of your kids 50 years down the road, every step that you have to take to get there for each of them, plus running the house, plus your job and everything. That's like too much. But when you break it down, like the Rebbe said, just go one word at a time, one letter at a time, and you'll get to the end little by little by little. I really like that because I feel like as moms, as women, we tend to get overwhelmed. Just we wake up in the morning, nothing happened, nobody said anything, and already we're overwhelmed. The day didn't even start, And I feel like if we can reel it in, okay, just let me get up out of bed. Let me do Natilat Yadayim. Let me say Shema and Moda'ani. Let me just go downstairs and start making breakfast. Like little by little by little. Then we eventually get to the end of the day. It's eventually 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and we made it through.
Exactly. By the time I finish sending all my kids off to school, like I feel I deserve a medal usually.
Yes.
But, actually when I start my morning, I have, we have 9 kids to get out the door in the morning and 4 different schools. And my philosophy is do what you can do. So if my 3-year-old is, not interested in putting on his socks, I'll put down the socks and I'll move on to what I can do. So I can make lunch for this child.
Right.
And if this child is, not interested in getting dressed, I don't focus on that. I move on to what I can do. And as long as I keep focusing on what I can do, I get to the end. We get all the kids off in a calm, hopefully, manner. Instead of focusing on what I can't do, or like, oh, I have to get 9 kids out the door. Break it down. I could put socks on a kid right now. I can get, this one ready for the bus. I can do this right now.
Boom. I think you nailed it on the head. I think you said exactly perfectly. Focus on what you can do.
Yes.
Don't focus on what you can't do. And
Yes.
with that, because I think you're right. Sometimes we get stuck that we can't do it and we're just banging our head against the wall. We get frustrated. The child get frustrated. People around us get frustrated when you know what? It's not working right now. Maybe it'll be work in 10 minutes from now. Let me go on to the next thing that I can do.
Exactly.
And it really makes such a tremendous difference. Thank you. Thank you so, so much, Rebbetzin Feige, for joining us on America's Top Rebbetzins. And in the merit of this class, may Hashem watch over all the Jewish people and give enormous strength to the IDF soldiers, including Yuval Kim Bat Miriam, Ziv Ben Tamar, Aviatar Zitoni Ben Natalie Viron, and Ben Menasha Ben Dikla. Thank you so much.
Thank you.